I take my dog Jake for a walk through the forest. It's a ritual that's become second nature to us, a peaceful escape from the day's demands. The forest, with its towering trees and winding trails, has always been a place of serenity. Nothing unusual ever happens here. That is, until tonight. As we make our way along the familiar path, the golden hues of the setting sun cast long shadows across the forest floor. The air is crisp, and the leaves rustle softly in the gentle breeze. Jake trots beside me, his tail wagging contentedly. We are both at ease, enjoying the tranquility of the evening. Suddenly I hear a rustling in the foliage along the trail. I stop and look around, straining my eyes to see what might be causing the sound. The forest is dense, and the fading light makes it difficult to see clearly. I see nothing out of the ordinary, but Jake's ears perk up, and he lets out a low, uneasy growl. It's probably just a squirrel, I reassure myself, though my heart begins to beat a little faster. We continue walking, but the forest feels different now. The air seems colder, the shadows deeper. A sense of unease settles over me. We haven't gone far when we hear the sound again. This time it's louder, closer. Out of the corner of my eye, I catch a glimpse of movement. I turn my head quickly, but whatever it was has vanished. Jake looks in the same direction, his growl growing more intense. Let's keep moving, I say, trying to sound calm. But the truth is, I'm starting to feel nervous. The forest, which usually feels like a sanctuary, now feels like a place of danger. I consider turning back, but the car park is still a fair distance away. As we continue down the path, my mind races. What could be out there? Is it an animal or something else? I try to shake off the fear, to convince myself that it's just my imagination. But then I see it. Just ahead, off the trail, something emerges from behind a tree. It's a creature, tall and lanky, with pale skin that almost seems to glow in the dim light. Its head and arm are visible, and they're grotesque. The head is completely bald, and all I can see are dark pits for eyes. I can barely make out its mouth, but even from this distance appears to be slightly open, almost with a grinning expression, but that could just be my memory playing tricks on me. I also recall the mouth looked too big for the creature's face. The arm seems to be incredibly long and skinny. The fingers wrapped around the tree are also very long. Jake barks furiously, and the creature quickly disappears behind the tree. Panic surges through me. Run, Jake, I shout, and we take off back down the path, my heart pounding in my chest. Jake is right beside me, panting as we run. He occasionally looks back, letting out a silent whine each time he does. We run as fast as we can, the forest a blur around us. As we run, I hear something moving through the trees alongside the trail. It's following us, keeping pace but staying hidden. The sound grows closer, and I can sense its presence. I don't dare look back. We arrive back at the car park, and I fumble with my car keys while trying to unlock the car. Jake is pressed up against me, whining as he looks back toward the start of the trail. I still refuse to turn around, but I'm listening for any sound behind me. In that moment, it seems still behind us, but I just wanted to get out of there. I unlock the car and open the driver's side door. Without hesitation, Jake jumps in and moves into the back seat. I get in and start the car. As my headlights come on, I look up and gasp in shock. There, at the end of the trail, stands the creature. I see a hunched over, almost translucent being on all fours. Its limbs look almost too long for its body. Those dark pits for eyes are seemingly looking straight at us. The creature doesn't stay long though. I only catch a glimpse of it as it is illuminated by the glow of the headlights. I guess it didn't like the sudden beams of light, as it suddenly bounded off into the forest. I haven't been back to that trail since. I started walking Jake around our neighborhood instead. Even though he used to love walking that trail, I don't think he minds the new routine. I don't know what I saw that night, and I haven't seen its like since. but whatever it was, it absolutely terrified me. It was one of those quiet nights with nothing going on, and Paul and I were killing time the usual way, driving around, hitting up a drive-through, and then hanging out in some empty car park on the edge of town. Tonight we found ourselves leaning against Paul's car in the parking lot of a 24-hour supermarket. The place was dead, just us and a row of dim lights that cast long, creepy shadows over the asphalt. Beyond the edge of the lot, a thick line of trees loomed in the dark, hiding who knows what. A loud metallic bang shattered the silence. It sounded like someone had thrown a heavy metal lid down onto concrete, and both of us jumped, instinctively looking toward the source. At the far end of the lot, just a few feet from the tree line, sat a large dumpster. In the dim light, we could only make out its shape, shadowed and still. Paul's mouth twisted into a smirk as he shrugged, but I noticed the tension in his shoulders. I felt uneasy, but I didn't want to look like a coward, so we kept talking. We'd almost forgotten about it when the sound came again. Only this time it was louder, like something or someone was thrashing against the metal. We went quiet, straining to listen, eyes fixed on the dumpster. "You think it's someone in trouble," I whispered, the thought hitting me all at once. Paul's face hardened, and without another word, he started toward the noise. I followed, my heart pounding in my chest, each step bringing a fresh wave of nerves. The closer we got, the louder the banging seemed to grow, echoing in the emptiness of the lot. About 20 feet from the dumpster, I saw a flash of something pale moving in the shadows, ducking quickly behind the metal. The sight froze me in my tracks. It wasn't an animal I'd ever seen. It was bigger, its limbs long and thin, with skin so pale it almost seemed to glow under the faint streetlights. I don't think we should get any closer," I said, swallowing hard. "Let's just go back to the car." Paul gave me a sharp look, a daring glint in his eyes. "Come on, it's probably just some homeless guy trying to mess with us." "Don't be a wimp," he rolled his eyes and turned back toward the dumpster. I stayed rooted to the spot, watching as he disappeared around the corner. There was a beat of silence. Then Paul burst back around the dumpster, eyes wide, face pale as he sprinted toward me, his breathing ragged. Go, he gasped, barely slowing as he reached me. I stumbled after him, half panicked, half confused. "Paul, what did you see?" I called, but he didn't answer, practically dragging me back to the car. He didn't stop until we'd both slammed our doors shut, and then he tore out of the lot, gravel kicking up behind us. For a few minutes he drove in silence, hands gripping the wheel, like he was trying to squeeze the life out of it. Finally, I couldn't hold back any longer. "Paul, what was it?" He shot me a look, his face tense and pale, eyes darting as if he expected something to jump out of the darkness. "It was this thing. A pale crawler," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "Skinny, pale, with these black eyes. It just watched me, and then it let out this hiss, like it was daring me to come closer." I'd read stories on Reddit about pale crawlers. I tried to laugh to shake off the tension. Dude, it was probably just some crackhead. Paul's face hardened, his grip on the wheel tightening. He kept driving silent and tense, and as we left the parking lot behind, I couldn't shake the image of that pale, twisted figure lurking in the shadows. My dad doesn't talk much about strange things. He's practical, grounded, the kind of guy who could fix an engine as easily as he could split firewood. But last winter, he told me a story that keeps me up at night. After my mum passed away, he'd stayed in the old country home they'd bought together, a little place set against a thick line of trees. It's the kind of place that's peaceful by day, but at night, especially in winter, It gets so dark and quiet that every creak feels like a scream. He started hearing sounds one cold evening, maybe a few weeks after the funeral. It was just small things at first, like a rustling outside his bedroom window. It could have been a branch in the wind, a raccoon, or some other animal sniffing around the porch. But the rustling would go on, scraping lightly, and when he'd get up to check, nothing would be there. A few nights later, he heard something heavier, a shuffling right along the side of the house. He even tried catching it in the act, rushing to the window, but each time there was only the night, still and cold. The nights passed, and the sounds grew bolder. One night he was lying in bed, drifting off, when something clambered up the outside wall, right near his bedroom. It started at the ground floor and moved up and steady, scraping steps, until he heard it over his head. That night he lay awake, staring at the ceiling as soft footsteps, far too light to be a person's, moved above him. He told himself he was imagining it, that his mind was just playing tricks, but he barely slept until morning. This went on for nights, sometimes closer to the house, sometimes as distant as the tree line. And then one night he'd had enough. He grabbed his rifle, slipped on his coat and boots, and went outside. The cold air was thick with silence, broken only by the crunch of his footsteps. He walked around the side of the house and froze, his breath catching in his chest. At the edge of the forest, just beyond the reach of his flashlight, he saw a figure, unnaturally pale, hunched and thin. Its skin was the color of bone, stretched tight over long, spindly limbs. It stood there, motionless, with dark eyes fixed on him, watching. Without thinking, he raised the rifle and fired. The sound cracked through the air, and for a moment he couldn't see anything through the recoil and the darkness. But when he lowered the rifle, the figure was gone, vanished into the shadows of the trees. He didn't go back to bed that night. Just sat in his living room, the rifle leaning against his knee, waiting. But there were no more sounds. And in the days that followed, the quiet returned to the house. It was almost a relief, he said, like something had finally left him in peace. But that peace wasn't complete. Sometimes when he looks out at the woods in the early morning or late at night, he sees it again, a pale shape standing just at the edge of the forest, watching. It doesn't come near the house anymore, he told me quietly, almost like he was talking to himself. But it's still out there waiting, just watching. And that's where he left it,